Each visitor at the Seagull Motel followed a carefully orchestrated routine. Upon arrival, the men would quietly check into their rooms, greeted only by a subtle nod from the front desk clerk. They were given keys with no small talk and kept to strict schedules. No two men arrived at the same time, and any sign of lingering was immediately discouraged by Tess's watchful team. Inside the rooms, the atmosphere was purposefully minimal. No traces were left behind, and every detail was thought out to prevent detection. The maids, loyal to Tess, would do a thorough clean between guests, wiping down every surface, keeping each room spotless and unassuming. The real magic, though, was in the network Tess built with the girls. Each woman had her role down to an art, rotating shifts and keeping communication tight, always aware of who was in which room, how long they stayed, and when they left. Tess had drilled the girls on secrecy and discipline, instilling a sense of pride in running a seamless operation that no one could infiltrate or even detect. Lovechild, watching all this from the background, was in awe of the smoothness Tess had brought to the business. He had always been good at strategizing, but she had taken his lessons and turned them into an art form. With her no-nonsense attitude and the girls' loyalty, Lovechild ran like a well-oiled machine, invisible to the untrained eye. Meanwhile, locals who frequented the Seagull Motel had no idea about the activities happening under their noses. The place appeared to be just another quiet roadside lodge, attracting only the occasional out-of-towner. For all intents and purposes, Tess's team was just running a low-key establishment. The community didn't bat an eye, leaving Tess and her crew in control of a masterfully hidden operation, a testament to the lessons Lovechild learned and the skills Tess had honed to perfection. With $20,000 rolling in each night, the Seagull Motel was more than a business, it was a quiet empire. Tess knew that kind of cash flow could bring both admiration and envy, so she took precautions to keep their operation low-key and protected. Lovechild, recognizing the risk, made a strategic move. She appointed Cap as the new head of security. Cap wasn't just muscle, he had a reputation, a network, and a sharp understanding of street politics. He knew the players in town, the dealers, the hustlers, even the quiet killers who moved undetected. Cap wasted no time in tightening alliances. He reached out to the neighborhood's influential figures, making it clear that as long as everyone respected the boundaries, there was money for all. His approach was a blend of mutual respect and quiet intimidation. He offered protection and kickbacks to certain dealers, ensuring they were taken care of if they kept their territory in check. For those who might think about crossing Lovechild's boundaries, Cap left little to the imagination. One slip, and they'd answer to him. Under Cap's watch, any small talk around Lovechild quickly faded. He kept a close eye on the Seagull Motel, even installing surveillance in subtle spots, monitoring who came and went. No visitor entered without him knowing who they were, where they came from, and why they were there. The locals quickly learned that lingering too close to Lovechild or trying to dig for information would bring Cap to their door, and no one wanted that kind of visit. With Cap's strategic alliances and iron-fisted security, Tess and Lovechild could breathe easier. The operation continued without hiccups, moving like a ghost through the night, and each of the key players in the area knew their place in the arrangement. The money flowed, the silence held, and Seagull Motel became an unspoken fixture in the underworld, a place that existed, thrived, but never drew too much attention. In the shadows, Lovechild and Tess watched their empire grow, knowing Cap's loyal network had their backs. The whispers reached every dark corner of Wilmington, painting a vivid picture of Lovechild's growing power and influence. Dirty Red had once been untouchable, a notorious figure with his grip around the beach's underground. But Lovechild's operation had not only edged him out, but left him with a new reputation, a wanted man with a cop's blood on his hands. The name Dirty Red now carried a different kind of fear, one that left him with few places to turn. The rumor of Officer Clux's death was more than just a tale. It was a badge of honor in the underground. No one knew for sure who had taken him out, but word on the streets was that Lovechild's hand was behind it. The story circulated in hushed tones, told and retold in shadowy bars and back alleys. Dirty Red had been seen with Officer Clux the night before the killing, and not long after, Clux's body had been discovered in the trunk of a deserted car on the city's edge. No witnesses, no evidence, just a cold, lifeless body and the lingering scent of betrayal. The factual rumor, as it was called in those circles, added a dangerous allure to Lovechild's name. Respect wasn't given, it was earned through whispered tales and unseen actions. Other operators in the game watched from afar, taking mental notes on the way Tess and Misty handled business. Seagull Motel was now a fortress, impenetrable and unshakable, its reputation sealed by the mystery surrounding Officer Clux's death. Those who thought of crossing Lovechild's crew thought twice. They saw what happened to Dirty Red and knew that Lovechild had the means to eliminate both problems and evidence. With Cap enforcing an invisible barrier around their empire, and the tale of Officer Clux's demise casting a dark shadow, Seagull Motel became a symbol of invincibility. Rivals steered clear, knowing that any attempt to disrupt their operation would bring consequences swift and unseen. Meanwhile, Dirty Red was left in the wind, his name tarnished and his allies dwindling, forced into hiding while Lovechild thrived. The streets now whispered only one name with fear and respect, and those who were smart enough knew better than to challenge it. Seagull Motel was not just a business, it was a legend in the making, a story that would haunt Myrtle Beach's underground for years to come. When Killjoy heard the news, it was like gasoline on a simmering fire. Lovechild's success had spread like wildfire, another triumph that seemed to echo back to him as a personal insult. Killjoy clenched his jaw, his fists tight around the cold metal of his pistol before he slammed it on the table. The sound rang out like a thunderclap, a sharp punctuation to the seething anger that radiated from him. He couldn't believe how Tess and Lovechild managed to not only survive, but thrive, no matter where they planted their roots. Every move he'd made to stifle them had only seemed to push them further, adding layers to their infamy and respect in circles that used to be his domain. The tales of Dirty Red's downfall, Officer Clux's mysterious death, and Lovechild's seamless rise at the Seagull Motel stung like a wound that wouldn't heal. Killjoy had once been the name that carried weight, a figure feared by Wilmington's hardest players. But now, Lovechild was taking over, his legacy leaving Killjoy's influence in the dust. He paced the room, his mind racing with schemes. He knew he couldn't go after Lovechild directly, not with Cap's security and their network keeping every angle covered. But the thought of doing nothing was unbearable. He needed a plan, something that would finally put an end to Lovechild's endless rise and remind the streets that Killjoy was still a force to be reckoned with. Leaning over the table, he glared at his closest allies, each of them tense under his gaze. "I don't care what it takes," he growled. "Find their weak spot. Everyone's got one, even Lovechild." His men exchanged wary glances, understanding the risk but knowing they had no choice. Killjoy's rage was not to be taken lightly. In the silence that followed, a twisted plan began to take shape in his mind. If Lovechild wanted to expand, Killjoy would make them fight for every inch. He'd make sure that the streets of Wilmington remembered his name, that every whispered tale of Lovechild's power would be met with a reminder of the wrath of Killjoy. He didn't care how far he had to go. All he wanted was to see Lovechild finally fall. The warning arrived quietly, just as all things did in Tess and Lovechild's world. A passing phrase from a trusted source, spoken with just enough weight to warrant caution. Killjoy had set his sights on Lovechild, fueled by bitterness and the sting of being overshadowed. Lovechild took in the news with a calm demeanor, but Tess could see the fire in his eyes. They both knew Killjoy's reputation. He wasn't the type to bluff. When he promised a visit, it was rarely anything less than deadly. Down in Myrtle Beach, Lovechild's operation was running as smoothly as ever, drawing attention and respect in ways that only added to Killjoy's fury. But Misty understood the game. She knew Killjoy's anger was rooted in his inability to halt Lovechild's relentless rise. So rather than react with panic, he and Tess prepared, anticipating every angle Killjoy might use to strike. Lovechild immediately doubled down on security, instructing Cap to tighten surveillance at every property and keep eyes on the ground, looking for anything suspicious. Cap, who was always 10 steps ahead, set up a watch network along the beach, positioning his men at every potential entry point Killjoy might use. They established a near-invisible ring of protection, keeping the operation guarded without disrupting the easygoing flow of business. Tess, on the other hand, reached out to her contacts, spreading a message that was as clear as it was unspoken. If Killjoy wanted to make a move, he would be walking into a trap. Tess and Lovechild didn't believe in outright threats. They let their actions speak louder. But Lovechild made sure the word reached Killjoy's people, warning him that Lovechild was ready, that any attempt would be met with a level of force even Killjoy hadn't seen before. As the days passed, Myrtle Beach remained as peaceful as ever, but beneath the surface, a silent storm brewed. Tess and Misty moved with a quiet confidence, knowing that if Killjoy dared to come, he'd find himself outmatched, facing a united force that wouldn't back down. And as Killjoy's plans lingered in the shadows, Lovechild's name only grew stronger, solidified by the knowledge that no threat, no matter how deadly, could shake their empire. In the end, they knew Killjoy would have to make a choice, risk everything in a high-stakes clash, or walk away with his pride bruised. Either way, Lovechild stood ready, their reputation only gaining strength as they awaited whatever move Killjoy dared to make. Lovechild barely flinched at the news of Killjoy's threats. Tess and Lovechild had dealt with men like him before, bitter, vengeful, eager to prove they still had influence. But Dawson knew that Killjoy was little more than a loud shadow in the rearview mirror, a remnant of Wilmington's past. Down in Myrtle Beach, Lovechild's operation had become so fortified that Killjoy's threats felt like nothing more than background noise. Every corner of their setup was secured, every exit and entry point watched. Cap's network of eyes and ears ensured that Lovechild was always a step ahead. Even the locals were quietly loyal, grateful for the subtle protection and respect Tess and Misty showed them. If Killjoy had any intentions of slipping in unnoticed, he'd be sorely mistaken. Myrtle Beach was Lovechild's territory now, and any intruder would be dealing with more than just Misty's crew. They'd be dealing with a city that had come to see Lovechild as part of its fabric. In truth, Lovechild saw Killjoy's grudge as nothing more than a desperate attempt to reclaim a name that no longer carried weight. Lovechild wasn't one to underestimate an enemy, but he also refused to let old rivalries disrupt their success. Tess, always the strategist, had run every possible scenario, and she knew their foundation was unshakable. Killjoy could try to slip in, but every route was covered, every escape blocked. So, they continued to run things as usual, steady and unbothered, confident that if Killjoy ever dared to make a move, it would be his last mistake. The beach remained theirs, an unspoken reminder that while Killjoy could threaten all he wanted, Lovechild was already too far ahead. The 6 o'clock news blared with the story, showing Dirty Red being led out of his beach house in cuffs, a swarm of officers surrounding him. The camera captured every detail, his disheveled hair, the faint trace of shock in his eyes as he was paraded in front of flashing lights and reporters' shouts. It was a sight that sent ripples through the underworld, a public downfall for a man who once moved through the shadows unchecked. The story quickly unfolded. The murder weapon, found hidden within the very walls of Dirty Red's beach house, had been traced back to none other than Fiona, his long-suffering bottom woman. It was no secret that Dirty Red had been brutal to her over the years, treating her with the same harsh, unyielding cruelty he showed his rivals. She bore the scars, both visible and invisible, of his relentless abuse. But now, Fiona had finally had her moment of retribution. She'd been the one to tip off the police, serving her own brand of justice and ensuring that Dirty Red took the fall for Officer Clux's murder. The irony was rich Dirty Red, who had so carefully crafted his image as untouchable, was brought down not by an enemy, but by the very woman he thought he'd broken. Fiona's revenge was quiet but effective. Her years of suffering turned into a calculated act that sealed his fate. As Dirty Red was loaded into the police car, it was clear that his empire had crumbled, undone by his own carelessness and cruelty. In Myrtle Beach, Lovechild and Tess heard the news with quiet satisfaction. Dirty Red's downfall was more than just the end of an old rival. It was a reminder of the careful line they walked, the respect and loyalty they had cultivated. They knew that treating people with respect wasn't just good business, it was insurance against the kind of betrayal that had shattered Dirty Red's world. In the shadows of Myrtle Beach, Lovechild's reputation only solidified further. They operated with a different code, one that made their empire stronger with each passing day. Dirty Red had thought violence and fear would protect him, but in the end, it was his cruelty that destroyed him. Meanwhile, Tess and Lovechild continued their reign, respected and unchallenged, knowing that the whispers of Dirty Red's downfall only served to make Lovechild's name even more untouchable. As Lovechild stepped into Earl's body shop, the familiar scent of oil and grease mixed with the faint echo of the radio humming in the background. Earl sat in his usual spot near the front, hunched over the day's newspaper, with a grin spreading wide across his face. When he spotted Lovechild, he raised the paper, displaying the bold headline detailing Dirty Red's downfall. Without missing a beat, Earl's voice boomed through the shop, filled with a mix of satisfaction and triumph. "It's a new day," he shouted, slapping the paper down onto the table with a hearty laugh. He looked at Lovechild with a gleam in his eye, a look that said more than words ever could. For both of them, Dirty Red's public disgrace meant more than just the fall of an old rival. It was a symbol of a changing era. The kind of ruthless, reckless rule Dirty Red had championed was crumbling, and in its place, Lovechild's way of doing business was rising, one that commanded respect without crossing lines that would come back to haunt him. Lovechild returned Earl's grin, giving a slight nod as he walked further into the shop. "Couldn't have happened to a better guy," he replied, his voice laced with quiet amusement. Earl chuckled, shaking his head in agreement, the laughter bouncing off the walls. He'd seen men like Dirty Red come and go, and he knew that the type of empire built on threats and brutality was doomed to fall eventually. "Things are looking up for you, kid," Earl said, his tone dropping to a more serious note. "You've done things different, and folks are taking notice." He glanced around the shop, as if ensuring they were alone before leaning in, lowering his voice. "You keep running things the way you are, and there's no limit to where you can go." Lovechild appreciated the sentiment. He knew Earl wasn't the type to dole out compliments lightly. Earl's support was another testament to the shift that was taking place. Lovechild's rise hadn't come from force alone. It came from careful moves, loyal connections, and a reputation that only strengthened with time. With a final nod, Lovechild patted Earl on the shoulder. "Here's to a new day," he said, his voice steady. Together, they looked over the paper one last time, both silently understanding that Dirty Red's end was the beginning of something much greater, a future where Lovechild's legacy would be the one casting the longest shadow. Earl's eyes sparkled with pride as he led Lovechild to the far side of the garage, a section tucked away behind a thick canvas divider that seemed to keep its secrets hidden from the rest of the shop. Lovechild followed, intrigued, as Earl moved with a quiet excitement he rarely showed. "There's no way it's a new day, and the king of the beach isn't riding new," Earl declared, his voice laced with a mix of admiration and thrill. With one smooth motion, he pulled back the cover to reveal the gleaming beauty beneath, a brand-new convertible Aston Martin, sitting low on custom chrome Forgiato rims that caught the light like diamonds. Lovechild's eyes widened as he took in the sight. The car was a work of art. Its sleek lines and aggressive stance made it look as if it was already in motion, even at a standstill. The custom rims, polished to perfection, added a flash of power that gave it an unmistakable edge. It was the kind of car that turned heads, commanded respect, and announced itself without a single word. "Built her just for you," Earl said, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "You roll up in this, and folks will know you're on top. No need to say a thing." He took a step back, letting Lovechild get closer, his eyes twinkling as he watched Lovechild's expression shift from surprise to pure appreciation. Lovechild ran his hand along the smooth, flawless paint, the deep metallic shine reflecting back a sense of power and accomplishment. He could already imagine cruising down the strip, the sun bouncing off the chrome as people turned to catch a glimpse. This wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It was a crown, a mark of his ascent and everything he'd built. He looked back at Earl, a genuine smile breaking through his usually composed demeanor. "You've outdone yourself," he said, nodding with respect. Earl grinned, slapping him on the back. "You deserve it, kid. Here's to your reign." Earl handed him the keys, a symbolic handoff that felt like passing a torch. Lovechild slipped into the driver's seat, feeling the luxurious leather mold to him like a throne. He started the engine, the low, throaty growl filling the garage and reverberating off the walls. It was a sound that demanded attention, a signal to the world that Lovechild had arrived, and he wasn't going anywhere. As he pulled out of the garage, the convertible top down and the chrome Forgiato sparkling, he knew this was more than just a car. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a new legacy, and as he cruised into the Myrtle Beach sun, he was ready for whatever the future held. As Lovechild cruised through the streets of Myrtle Beach in his new convertible Aston Martin, the engine growled beneath him, a deep roar that turned heads and demanded respect. The sun glinted off the chrome Forgiatos, casting reflections on the pavement as he drove with the top down, the wind whipping through his hair. Everywhere he looked, hustlers and players paused in their tracks, their conversations fading as they recognized the king of the beach gliding by. With a confident grin, Lovechild tapped the horn, a sharp, commanding sound that echoed down the street. The response was immediate: nods of acknowledgement, waves of respect, and even a few cheers from the corners where men gathered, each of them aware of the power that radiated from him. This was more than just a car. It was a symbol of his dominance and the status he had achieved in a world that often moved in shadows. Across his lap lay a chrome nickel-plated automatic pistol, a stark contrast to the luxury surrounding him. It was a reminder of the game he played, the risks that lingered just beneath the surface of his newfound success. Lovechild was no stranger to danger. He understood that respect was often earned through strength, and that in his world, appearances could be deceiving. While he reveled in the admiration of the streets, he remained vigilant, knowing that envy could breed hostility. As he turned onto the road leading to the Seagull Motel, Lovechild's mind raced with the possibilities of the day ahead. The motel was bustling with activity. It had become a hub for business and pleasure, a place where deals were made and connections were strengthened. He was eager to see Tess and Misty, to share the excitement of his new ride and the news of Dirty Red's downfall, which had sent ripples through the underworld. Pulling into the parking lot, he took a moment to appreciate the view. This was his territory, a landscape he had shaped with grit and determination. He shifted the pistol slightly, ensuring it was within reach but hidden from view, a precaution in a world where threats lurked in unexpected places. Stepping out of the Aston Martin, Lovechild straightened his jacket, the weight of the gun still there, but he wore it like a badge of honor. He walked toward the entrance of the Seagull Motel, head held high, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. With each step, he felt the eyes of the hustlers and players on him, and he knew that today was just another step in solidifying his legacy. The king had arrived, and he intended to stay on top. As Lovechild stepped into the Seagull Motel, he was met with the vibrant energy that filled the air. Tess and the girls stood at the entrance, their expressions a mix of excitement and pride. They were all too aware of the significance of Lovechild's new ride, a clear signal that the reign of Dirty Red was over and that a new era had begun. Tess stepped forward first, her eyes shining with mischief and determination. "Look who's decided to join us, the king of the beach," she teased, her smile infectious. The girls flanked her, each holding shopping bags brimming with cash, a testament to their month of hard work and the operations they'd successfully run in Lovechild's name. "Thought we'd match your crowning with a little treasure of our own," one of the girls chimed in, her voice playful as she waved a bag teasingly in the air. They had taken the initiative while Lovechild basked in his triumph, turning the hustle into a significant financial win. It was a gesture of loyalty and ambition, a clear indication that they weren't just followers, they were partners in this empire. Lovechild's grin widened as he approached them, the bags of money a symbol of their commitment to elevate him even further. He could see the pride in their eyes, the shared vision of making him not just the king of the beach, but the king of the entire game. This was a team that understood the stakes, one that knew how to navigate the complexities of their world with finesse and strategy. "Now this is what I call a warm welcome," he said, reaching for the nearest bag and peeking inside. Stacks of cash greeted him, the promise of new opportunities and the fuel to further their ambitions. "You ladies have been busy." Tess stepped closer, her tone turning serious for a moment. "We've got our eyes on something bigger, Lovechild. With Dirty Red out of the picture, there are new opportunities opening up. We can expand our reach, and with this kind of money, we can make some real moves." He nodded, appreciating her foresight. "Let's not waste any time then. We need to solidify our position and ensure everyone knows who's in charge now." The girls nodded, their energy palpable, ready to dive into the plans for the future. They all understood that Lovechild's ascendance was just the beginning. Together, they would create a legacy that went beyond the beach, one that would echo through the streets and solidify their names in the game. As they gathered around, sharing ideas and strategies, Lovechild felt a surge of confidence. He was not alone in this. With Tess and the girls by his side, they were more than just a crew. They were a force to be reckoned with. The crown was on his head, and together they were ready to conquer the game. A year had slipped by like sand through fingers, and life around Myrtle Beach had changed, each day carving deeper lines of power and influence under Lovechild's rule. Dirty Red, once the notorious shadow cast over the coast, was now just a distant memory, shipped off to a maximum security prison to serve time for Officer Clux's murder. His reputation had dissolved into whispers, and the only people who still spoke his name were those who wanted to remember what happened when you crossed the wrong lines. The streets had adjusted, shifting their loyalty and aligning themselves with Lovechild, who now ruled Myrtle Beach with a steady, watchful eye. Tess and the girls had continued to work with relentless ambition, expanding their operations across town, and their network now stretched beyond the beach, touching every major player in the region. Every corner of the coast was under their influence, and anyone looking to do business knew they had to go through Lovechild and his team. The Seagull Motel had transformed too. Once a low-key spot for discreet meetings and exchanges, it was now the unofficial headquarters of Lovechild's growing empire. It buzzed with energy and authority, where deals were made and futures were decided. Tess had even convinced Lovechild to put some of their earnings into small businesses around town, a move that had not only expanded their reach, but also brought them respect from those who once viewed them as just another gang. But despite the empire they'd built, Lovechild knew there were always dangers lurking. Killjoy's name would occasionally resurface in whispers, hints that he might still be out there, plotting revenge for the way Lovechild had taken over. But Lovechild remained calm, always ready and never careless, knowing that his rule depended on staying sharp, staying aware, and never underestimating an old rival. As the year closed, Lovechild sat in his convertible, parked just along the coast, watching the waves roll in and feeling the weight of all that he had built. Dirty Red was gone. Killjoy was just a shadow at the edge of his thoughts, and the beach was his. The king had solidified his reign, and with Tess and his loyal team at his side, he knew this was only the beginning of what they could achieve. Lovechild had turned his vision for Myrtle Beach into a thriving reality. The Seagull Motel was no longer just a hotspot for backroom deals. It was now a respectable, even iconic, piece of beachfront property. Lovechild had renovated the motel, cleaning it up and giving it a sleek new look, attracting tourists and locals alike. What was once known only in the underground had transformed into a prime piece of real estate. He didn't stop there. Lovechild purchased all the lots surrounding the motel, expanding his influence beyond the building itself. Instead of hoarding the land, he leased it out strategically to foreign business people eager to break into the bustling Myrtle Beach scene. Word had spread internationally about the coast's booming economy, and with the influx of new faces, Lovechild saw an opportunity to create a diverse business community around him, one that could keep his empire stable and profitable without drawing too much attention. He watched as new restaurants, boutiques, and specialty shops opened their doors, each one paying rent to him and adding layers of legitimacy to his growing empire. What had once been a gritty corner of the beach was now a vibrant center of commerce. Foreign entrepreneurs brought their own cultures and flavors, attracting a wide variety of tourists and generating steady revenue. It was a well-planned move that further distanced him from his old life. The success of these businesses meant he no longer had to rely solely on the streets to fund his ambitions. Lovechild now held the title of a legitimate businessman, his money flowing through clean channels. The new venture attracted the attention of city officials who, impressed by the facelift he'd given the area, began to see him as a community asset. Slowly, his reputation shifted from that of a feared underground figure to a respected local tycoon. Still, he never forgot his roots. Tess and the girls managed the day-to-day of the motel's renewed operations, ensuring it ran smoothly while keeping an eye on anything or anyone that could pose a threat. He continued to meet with his network of connections, both new and old, carefully balancing respectability with vigilance. Killjoy's name would occasionally reemerge in faint whispers, but Lovechild's eyes were always open, his senses sharp. He knew that with every step he took into the world of legitimate business, he had to be twice as careful. Sitting in his office overlooking the beach, Lovechild felt a rare moment of satisfaction. Myrtle Beach wasn't just his playground, it was his kingdom. The empire he'd built was no longer just for survival, it was a legacy in the making. And with each new business he brought into the fold, he was one step closer to becoming untouchable. The word had spread far and wide about Myrtle Beach's vibrant scene, and soon, seasoned pimps from the legendary streets of Chicago, Detroit, and Milwaukee made their way down, eager to get a piece of the action. These were men who had cut their teeth in the game, veterans with reputations stretching back to some of the toughest cities in the country. They strutted into Myrtle Beach with flash and flare, dripping in confidence and draped in their finest threads, ready to make their mark on the coast. Lovechild welcomed them with open arms, aware that their presence brought both opportunity and risk. These men were of his kind, but as he liked to say, not his breed. They shared the same hustle and ambition, but their worlds were different. They were used to concrete jungles and street corners, not the sun-soaked, tourist-packed paradise Lovechild ruled. He was a king in his own right, and while he respected their experience, he knew that Myrtle Beach was his territory, a place where his rules and his rhythm set the pace. He set up meetings at the Seagull Motel, where he and Tess met each of them personally. Lovechild extended a sense of Southern hospitality, making it clear they were welcome but under his terms. He laid down ground rules to keep peace and ensure that Myrtle Beach didn't devolve into chaos, with too many egos competing for control. These visiting players had to respect his established order. There was no room for sloppy business or street warfare in his backyard. Despite their seasoned ways, the newcomers quickly realized they were in a different kind of game. Myrtle Beach wasn't about grinding on corners or operating under the radar. This was a place where Lovechild's influence ran deep, from the boardwalks to the high-end clubs to the quiet motel meetings that handled matters off the books. The tourists who flocked to the beach had money to spend, and with Lovechild's savvy guidance, everyone saw profits without stirring up the heat that could jeopardize it all. Lovechild wasn't just a hustler, he was a strategist. He allowed these men a slice of the nightlife, letting them taste the profits of his kingdom, but always with an understanding Myrtle Beach was his crown jewel. He made it clear that while they might come from cities where the game ran strong, they were guests in his empire, and the beach operated by his rules. The pimps from up north respected that, seeing in Lovechild a rare blend of ambition and control. They might be cut from the same cloth, but they knew he was a rare breed, one who had turned Myrtle Beach into a powerhouse of influence, money, and respect. And as long as they respected the king of the beach, there was room enough for everyone to thrive in his carefully built paradise. Despite Lovechild's undeniable rise to power and the respect his name commanded from coast to coast, there was still a dark cloud that hung over him, a silent, unspoken tension that refused to dissipate. His reputation in the underground world was stellar. He had redefined the game in Myrtle Beach, taken down his enemies, and reigned supreme as both a businessman and a kingpin. But no matter how high he climbed or how far his influence stretched, the shadow of Killjoy still loomed, a reminder of unfinished business. The conflict with Killjoy had been simmering quietly, a slow burn rather than an open war. They hadn't crossed paths directly in over a year, yet Lovechild could feel his old rival's presence like a ghost lingering just out of sight. It was as though Killjoy's name echoed in every whisper of jealousy, in the eyes of men who envied Lovechild's power but feared his wrath. They knew that Killjoy, a fierce player in his own right, still nursed a deep-seated grudge, a vendetta that simmered beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to erupt. Lovechild had tried to brush it off, to focus on his growing empire and the loyal network he had built. But in the quiet hours, when he sat alone in his office overlooking the beach, the weight of that silent feud pressed down on him. He knew that as long as Killjoy was out there, his own power would never feel completely secure. Killjoy was the kind of enemy who didn't forget, who would watch and wait for the perfect opening to strike. Tess and the girls noticed it too. The way Lovechild sometimes grew quiet, lost in thought, as if anticipating a move from his rival that had yet to come. Tess had tried to ease his mind, telling him that he'd come too far for anyone to knock him down now. But even she knew that Killjoy was different. He wasn't just another enemy, he was a threat that couldn't be ignored, a ghost from the past that refused to rest. So Lovechild prepared. He fortified his empire, surrounding himself with loyal allies and expanding his connections in both the legal and underground worlds. He kept his eyes open, ears to the ground, and every now and then he'd hear a whisper, a sighting of Killjoy in a nearby town, a rumor of him recruiting men, or a message relayed by those who traveled the same underground paths. Each piece of intel reminded him that Killjoy was patient, waiting for a moment of weakness to make his move. Lovechild knew he would eventually have to confront Killjoy to settle this score once and for all if he was ever to feel truly at peace on his throne. The unspoken feud was a storm gathering strength on the horizon, and Lovechild was readying himself for it, sharpening his focus and hardening his resolve. Until that day came, he would keep building, keep thriving, and keep his kingdom secure. And when the inevitable confrontation with Killjoy finally arrived, he would be ready to prove once and for all who was the true king of the game. At Earl's Body Shop, the atmosphere was charged with an intensity that hadn't been felt in a long time. Lovechild stood over 3 sleek, inconspicuous vehicles, each one carefully prepped with hidden compartments stuffed with enough firepower to wage a full-scale assault. He had made up his mind. If Killjoy wouldn't come to him, he'd take the fight directly to Killjoy's doorstep in Wilmington. Uglytown, as it was known on the streets, was where Killjoy reigned, but Lovechild was ready to change that. Earl and his crew worked swiftly, welding in secret compartments, ensuring each vehicle was armed and disguised to avoid detection. Lovechild knew that moving this kind of artillery was risky, but he wasn't going in with half measures. This wasn't a simple warning or a scare tactic. This was an invasion. He had gathered a loyal crew of seasoned assassins, each one handpicked for their skills and absolute loyalty. These were men who owed him their lives, men who understood that this mission wasn't about money, but about loyalty, legacy, and vengeance. As he walked around the shop, Lovechild inspected each vehicle, mentally running through the plan. The cars would serve as both transport and mobile armories, allowing his men to be fully equipped no matter what obstacles they faced in Uglytown. He knew Killjoy wouldn't expect this level of aggression, especially from someone who had been content to rule Myrtle Beach quietly. But Lovechild was tired of waiting, tired of the threat that lurked in the shadows. He was determined to put an end to it once and for all. Tess arrived, eyes wide as she took in the preparations. She had seen Lovechild in action before, but this was different. This was war. She stepped close to him, her voice low and steady. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her gaze searching his face for any sign of doubt. Lovechild looked at her, his expression hard, unyielding. "Killjoy's been breathing down my neck for too long. This ends now," he replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm done letting him control the narrative. We're taking this fight to him, and when we're done, Wilmington's gonna know who runs things." Earl clapped Lovechild on the shoulder, a nod of respect passing between them. "You're going in heavy, boss. If you pull this off, there won't be anyone left who doubts you." Lovechild smirked, adjusting the cufflinks on his sleeves as he surveyed the fleet one last time. "When we roll into Uglytown, Killjoy's gonna know what real power looks like. He wanted a fight? I'm bringing him the whole damn war." As the vehicles were finished and the team assembled, Lovechild took one last look around Earl's shop. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for. With his army of assassins, he was prepared to march into Uglytown and rewrite the rules. By the time he was done, Killjoy would be nothing more than a memory, and Wilmington would bow to a new king. As Lovechild's convoy rolled past the "Welcome to Port City" sign, a hush settled over the car. This was it. They were deep in Killjoy's territory now, a place where a misstep could cost them everything. Big Cap rode shotgun, his gaze scanning the darkened streets of Wilmington with a keen eye, while Tess sat in the back, her hand resting on the pistol tucked under her coat, her mind focused and ready for what lay ahead. Lovechild, steady and composed, guided the convoy straight into the heart of Port City. He had chosen their accommodations strategically, booking rooms near the Battleship Museum, a location bustling with enough tourists and activity to allow his crew to blend in without drawing attention. The area's heavy foot traffic also served as cover, making it harder for Killjoy's men to pinpoint their presence. Lovechild knew that moving low-key was crucial in these first hours. He needed time to set up, to gather intel, and to plan his first strike without tipping his hand. Once they arrived, Lovechild checked everyone into their rooms personally, ensuring the team was spread out across several rooms to avoid suspicion. He knew Killjoy's network would be watching for anything unusual, but by staying at a popular tourist spot, he minimized the chances of being detected right away. As they settled into their rooms, Lovechild called a quick meeting, gathering his trusted circle. "Here's how this is going down," he said, voice low but firm. "We're not here to make noise. Not yet. First, we're going to get a lay of the land. Find out who's still loyal to Killjoy and who's looking for a way out." Big Cap nodded, his massive frame tense with anticipation. "What's the word on Killjoy's men?" he asked, already itching to get the upper hand. Lovechild smirked. "From what I've heard, Killjoy's grip isn't as strong as it used to be. A lot of his guys are tired of the chaos, the unpredictable moves. They want stability, something I can give them." Tess crossed her arms, a sly smile playing at her lips. "So we're here to do more than just take him out. We're here to replace him." Lovechild nodded. "Exactly. Killjoy may think he owns this city, but by the time we're done, Wilmington won't even remember his name." With that, the team dispersed, each with an assignment. Big Cap would reach out to some of the local hustlers, probing for any signs of discontent among Killjoy's ranks. Tess, with her charm and intuition, would hit the popular night spots, listening for whispers about Killjoy's operations and looking for anyone who might be ready to switch allegiances. Lovechild sat alone for a moment, staring out at the Battleship Museum across the water, feeling the weight of the mission ahead. This was more than just a takeover. This was his chance to rewrite his legacy, to put the past behind him and cement his place as a king. With Big Cap, Tess, and his loyal army backing him, he knew he had all he needed to pull it off. As the night deepened and the city lights flickered over the water, Lovechild took a deep breath, ready for the long game. This was Port City now, but soon it would be his. Lovechild gripped the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the road ahead as he cut through Wilmington's darkened streets. Driving alone had its risks, but he wanted to make it look like he was operating solo, an easy target, perhaps, to any eyes that might be watching. In reality, Big Cap and Tess were trailing just far enough behind to stay out of sight, their car blending with the sparse traffic. They were his shadows, ready to jump in at a moment's notice if anything went sideways. Lovechild's mind was sharp, focused on the first step of his plan. He knew he couldn't just storm into Uglytown and expect Killjoy to fall. Wilmington was a city with its own codes, alliances, and grudges, and he needed to move strategically if he wanted to turn Killjoy's people without drawing too much heat. As he approached a quieter part of town, he slowed down, checking his surroundings. His intel told him that a few of Killjoy's top men frequented a rundown bar on the outskirts of Uglytown, a place notorious for loose lips and cheap drinks. Lovechild knew he'd have to show his face there soon, let the word spread that he was in town, and make it clear that he wasn't hiding. He parked a few blocks away, letting the car idle for a moment as he went over the plan in his mind. Big Cap's voice crackled over his earpiece. "We're about 3 cars back, boss. Just say the word." Lovechild smirked, his calm voice coming through in response. "Stay back. Let me walk in alone. I want to make sure they see me before they know you two are around." "Got it," Tess replied, her tone laced with confidence. "We're ready if anything pops off." Lovechild stepped out, the city's humid air hitting him as he closed the car door and adjusted his jacket. He patted the chrome-plated pistol at his hip for reassurance, though he knew he might not even need it tonight. This was about sending a message, making his presence felt. He strode down the dimly lit sidewalk, his steps steady and unhurried. The bar loomed ahead, its neon sign flickering, casting an eerie glow on the faces of the patrons standing outside. He could feel their eyes on him as he walked by, sizing him up, trying to figure out who he was and why he'd come alone. As he stepped inside, the place went quiet for a beat. Lovechild scanned the room, his gaze landing on a group of men huddled in a corner booth, their conversation dying as they took notice of him. He could tell from their reactions that word of his arrival in town had already spread. They knew who he was and why he might be there. One of the men, a lean figure with a scar running down his cheek, raised his glass in a mock toast. "Well, well," he sneered. "Didn't think we'd see Myrtle Beach's golden boy strolling through Uglytown." Lovechild smirked, nodding in acknowledgement as he walked over to the bar. "Just thought I'd pay my respects," he said coolly, locking eyes with the man. "Heard Wilmington's got a lot to offer." The man chuckled, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. "Ain't nothing here for you. Killjoy runs this place." Lovechild took a seat, signaling the bartender. "For now," he replied, his tone casual but loaded with implication. "But maybe it's time for a change. I've got my eyes on Wilmington, and I'm looking for people ready to be part of something bigger." The room grew tense, the air thick with anticipation. Lovechild wasn't just making small talk. He was extending an invitation, a chance for them to consider a life beyond Killjoy's rule. The man with the scar sized him up, his gaze flickering with a hint of interest, despite his loyalty to Killjoy. The others watched, wary but intrigued, realizing that Lovechild's offer wasn't a bluff. He was here to make moves, to shift the balance of power, and he wasn't leaving until he had planted the seeds of something bigger. And as Lovechild leaned back, exuding confidence and calm, he knew that the message had been delivered. This was just the beginning. Without breaking eye contact, Lovechild reached into his coat and pulled out a thick stack of cash, bound with a simple rubber band. He placed it on the table in front of the man with the scar, the bills fanning out slightly, showing their weight and intent. The entire bar seemed to hold its breath, every eye fixed on the money now glinting under the dim lights. "Consider it an investment," Lovechild said smoothly, his tone low but commanding. "That's for you, and whoever you think might be ready to make a change. It's time Wilmington saw a little revolution." The man with the scar glanced down at the cash, his fingers twitching as he resisted the immediate urge to reach for it. He looked back up at Lovechild, his expression hard but his resolve clearly weakening. The others around him shifted, a few already leaning forward with interest, calculating the possibilities that this investment could open up. The man finally allowed himself a small, cautious grin. "Killjoy's got a long reach," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the hum of the bar. "But I'll admit he doesn't drop stacks like this." Lovechild gave him a nod, understanding the undertone. "Killjoy's reach is only as long as the people who follow him," he replied. "I'm giving you a choice, a way to move up, out from under his shadow. That stack's just a start. You keep him in the dark about this, and there'll be plenty more where that came from." The man with the scar picked up the cash, running his thumb along the edges as he took it in, as if weighing the money against years of loyalty to Killjoy. Slowly, he pocketed the wad, his eyes locking back onto Lovechild with a newfound respect, and perhaps a hint of loyalty shifting already. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll keep an ear to the ground, see who's tired of living in Uglytown. But make no mistake, if you want Killjoy gone, it won't be quiet." Lovechild's lips curled into a smirk, a flash of excitement in his eyes. "Good. I never planned on quiet." With that, he rose from the table, giving a nod to the man with the scar and the others around him. He strode out of the bar, leaving them to mull over the new possibility that had just entered their world. As he stepped outside, Big Cap and Tess fell into place behind him, sensing that he'd made exactly the impression he wanted. The wheels were in motion. Wilmington wouldn't know what hit it. The call from Scar came just after midnight, his voice calm but brimming with the anticipation of what was about to go down. "We're set," he said. "Got 5 of my best, and we're ready to move on your word." Lovechild leaned back, the cold metal of his pistol pressing against his side. "Good," he replied, his voice steady and sharp. "This has to be clean. Killjoy is mine. I want him alive, tied up so he can see what's coming. But his men?" He paused, his tone hardening. "Take them out, all of them." Scar let out a low chuckle, understanding the gravity of Lovechild's words. "Understood. We'll leave no witnesses." Lovechild gave him the location and time to meet, wanting Scar's team in position by the time he and Big Cap arrived. As he ended the call, he turned to Big Cap and Tess, who were already suited up, their eyes mirroring his determination. "Tonight," Lovechild said, his voice low but charged with purpose, "we take out the last piece standing between us and total control of Wilmington. Killjoy's been running this city too long, and it's time he answers for it." Big Cap grinned, his knuckles cracking as he flexed his hands, eager to get his part done. "About time we give him a taste of his own medicine," he said, his eyes gleaming. Tess nodded, her face steely with resolve. "Let's make this quick and clean. No time for mercy." With that, they piled into the car, the streetlights casting eerie shadows as they made their way through the silent, empty streets. Lovechild's mind was razor-focused, visualizing every step of the plan. Scar's men would handle the first wave, sweeping through Killjoy's compound and eliminating his guards. Once they had Killjoy isolated, Lovechild would take over, making sure the man knew exactly who had come for him. As they pulled up near the compound, Lovechild spotted Scar and his men, waiting in the shadows, weapons at the ready. Scar gave a quick nod, acknowledging Lovechild's presence, then motioned to his men, signaling the start of the attack. Within moments, the silence shattered with the muted sound of gunfire as Scar's team moved in, swift and deadly. Lovechild and Big Cap followed closely, taking out any stragglers as they pushed through the compound, the air thick with smoke and the faint scent of gunpowder. Killjoy's men never saw it coming. They fell one by one, caught off guard in the dead of night, their loyalty to Killjoy costing them everything. At the end of the hall, Lovechild spotted Killjoy, cornered and desperate, his back against the wall, his eyes wide with terror as he realized the game was over. Lovechild stepped forward, gun drawn, as Big Cap and Scar's men moved in to restrain him, binding his hands and forcing him to his knees. Lovechild leaned in, his voice a cold whisper. "You thought you could run this city forever, thought you were untouchable." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "But now it's my turn, and you're going to watch it happen." Killjoy struggled, his face twisted with rage and fear, but he was powerless now. Lovechild had stripped him of his empire, his men, and now his control. With a final nod to Big Cap, Lovechild signaled for them to take Killjoy away. "Let's show him what it's like to be at the mercy of someone stronger," he said, his voice filled with finality. Tonight marked the beginning of a new reign. Wilmington belonged to Lovechild now. As the last of Killjoy's men fell, Scar and his crew moved swiftly, dousing the compound in gasoline, the sharp scent filling the air. Lovechild watched from a distance, his eyes fixed on the building that had been Killjoy's fortress for so long. The flames would be a symbol, a signal to everyone who once feared or served Killjoy that his reign was over, and a new power had taken his place. With a flick of a lighter, Scar set the flames ablaze, the fire catching quickly and roaring to life, engulfing everything in its path. The orange glow illuminated the night sky, thick smoke billowing up, visible for miles around. Lovechild could almost feel the heat from where he stood, a satisfied smile tugging at his lips. This was poetic justice, the same fate Killjoy had once dealt to Dawson, now coming full circle. The flames licked higher, consuming every trace of the man who had ruled with brutality and fear. Killjoy, bound and powerless, was forced to watch, his eyes wide with terror as his empire burned to the ground. Lovechild turned to Big Cap, nodding once. "Let's go. Our message has been sent." As they walked away, the night air filled with the crackling of flames, Lovechild knew this was more than revenge. This was his legacy, his declaration that he was untouchable. By morning, Wilmington would know Lovechild was not just king of the beach, he was king of the entire coast. Lovechild and Big Cap drove in silence, the weight of what was to come hanging heavily in the car. Killjoy sat in the back seat, hands bound and eyes defiant, though a glint of fear crept in as he watched the streets grow darker and more deserted. The city lights faded, giving way to the quiet, eerie shadows of the port, where rows of rusted salvage cars and looming shipping containers lined the waterfront. The distant sound of water lapping against the docks was the only noise that broke the stillness. Lovechild pulled up beside a line of stacked containers, their massive frames towering over the car, casting long, ominous shadows. Big Cap climbed out first, his imposing figure illuminated by the headlights, and opened the back door, yanking Killjoy out by his arm. Killjoy stumbled but held his ground, refusing to show weakness despite his fate. Lovechild stepped out slowly, his gaze cold and unyielding as he approached Killjoy, who was now forced to his knees by Big Cap. The man who had once terrorized Wilmington was now stripped of his power, reduced to a shell of his former self. "Look around," Lovechild said, his voice calm yet chilling. "This is where your story ends. You spent years tearing people down, using fear to control this city." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "But fear isn't what rules Wilmington anymore." "I do." Killjoy spat on the ground, his voice hoarse but laced with defiance. "You think they'll follow you?" He sneered. "You're just another hustler, waiting for the next gun to come along and take your throne." Lovechild smirked, unaffected by the taunt. He pulled his chrome-plated pistol from his waistband, letting the metal glint in the dim light as he aimed it squarely at Killjoy's face. "The difference is," he said, his tone deadly calm, "I don't leave loose ends." He nodded to Big Cap, who stepped forward and began to drag Killjoy toward an open container nearby. Inside was darkness, an echo of the countless bodies Killjoy had once buried in Wilmington's past. Now it was his turn to join them. As Big Cap chained Killjoy's hands to the interior wall of the container, Lovechild leaned in close, speaking just above a whisper. "You wanted to be a king, but a true king doesn't just rule, he builds something lasting." Just as Big Cap began to close the container door, Lovechild stepped forward, raising his pistol one last time. Killjoy, sensing what was coming, froze, his defiant facade finally cracking as he looked up at Lovechild with wide, fearful eyes. "I told you," Lovechild murmured, his voice low and final, "no loose ends." Before Killjoy could utter a single word, Lovechild pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the stillness of the port, a single, sharp crack that punctuated the end of Killjoy's reign. Killjoy slumped, the last of his power fading with him as the light left his eyes. Lovechild stepped back, watching for a moment as Big Cap secured the container door, locking the dark chapter of Wilmington's history behind steel walls. The faint scent of gunpowder lingered in the air, mingling with the salty breeze from the docks. Without another word, Lovechild and Big Cap turned and walked away, leaving Killjoy's lifeless body sealed in the darkness. As they drove back toward the city, the weight of their actions settled over them, yet there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing they had claimed Wilmington and ensured it was theirs alone. From that night forward, word would spread that Lovechild was not a man to cross. Wilmington was his kingdom now, and no one would ever dare challenge his rule. To be continued.